Fix old cameras. Your successful completion of the demonstrated repair ultimately depends on the quality of your tools, the condition of your camera, and most importantly, your repair ability.
The shutter curtains on the Minolta X-series cameras have been known to become derailed because of a finger poke or an errant liter of film getting stuck into the shutter track. The connecting bands of the shutter, they hop off of the pulleys and then cause the ribbon to bind along the track. By removing the lower shutter band guide, we get a better look at the proper tracking of the shutter band. This is going to be a fairly advanced disassembly, so if you haven't done some repairs, you might want to watch some of the other Fix Old Camera videos of some of the simpler repairs and attempt those first. Majority of the disassembly footage will be on the Minolta X600, for this camera has a AAA battery chamber and grip on the front of the camera, therefore is a little harder to disassemble. Once the top cover is removed of the XG series, all the footage will be the same as far as access to the shutter. The X370 is nearly identical to the top cover removal of the X600. All in all, the disassembly of the entire line of X-series cameras is very similar from camera to camera. So to get the simple stuff out of the way, remove the back cover, the bottom cover held in place with 4 screws, the rewind knob, the ASA dial, and the ASA dial retainer, cover for the advance lever held in place with 2 screws hidden underneath the leatherette, the advance lever retaining screw that retains the advance lever, and the advance lever spring, and then finally the top cover retaining spanner. Before going any further, let's take a look at what the shutter's doing. When you try to advance the shutter doesn't track. It starts to catch because the band's off of the roller and it gaps. Not good. That's why we need to completely disassemble it and access the shutter to reset the shutter bands. On all the X-series cameras, you'll need to remove the strap lug ring and the 2 screws that hold the plate on the rewind side of the camera. On the X600, you'll need to peel back the leatherette on the battery chamber to access the 2 screws. With the screws and the strap lug ring removed, you'll be able to lift the battery chamber free even though it will still be attached by wires. The battery chamber contacts can be left in place, or the battery chamber can be removed by desoldering the positive and negative wire. There are 4 screws that hold the front mirror box plate, and there are 6 screws that hold the bottom wind plate. Remove this screw that's next to the eyepiece and the shutter speed dial position. Remove the screw that's next to the shutter release button position. Remove the screw that also holds the red wire clip. This side of the prism flex circuit is now free from the camera housing. Remove the ASA dial and contacts. Write down the position of the connecting wires. And unsolder. Remove the flex circuit screw. Now gently lift the flex circuit to reveal another housing screw on the left side of the eyepiece that also needs to be removed. Now flip the camera over, and as you address the bottom cover, remove the E-ring that retains the advance lever linkage. That seems to be as good as anything to name it. Then also we'll need to remove the wire from the clip, the yellow wire from the clip, after we remove the advance lever linkage from the post. The mirror box and shutter housing can now be separated from the camera chassis. If you did not unsolder all the connecting wires, then you need to be very aware of those wires so you don't pull them free. It is very advisable to diagram or photograph the wire positions. Now, with the mirror box and shutter housing free, you'll be able to track the shutter bands and reposition them properly upon their rollers. It can be a bit tedious. Don't get in a hurry because you don't want to tear the cloth of either the shutter or the shutter bands, or pull them so hard that they are separated from their adhesive. The shutter can be manually tripped once the bands are in the proper position to check for the proper operation of the shutter to make certain that the curtains are now traveling across the focal plane as they should. With proper mechanical operation of the shutter confirmed, the shutter box and assembly can be now seated back into the camera. Be careful that the wires are routed properly and that they're not pinched. The advanced linkage and the advanced linkage spring can now be reinstalled. In order to do that, the motor drive linkage will need to be removed so that the fork of the advanced lever linkage can be slipped over its bushing. Once the advanced lever linkage is seated as it should be, reinstall the motor drive linkage so that it will help hold the advanced lever linkage in position as the reassembly process progresses. Don't forget to mount the yellow wires in their clip before proceeding with attaching. As you're positioning the advanced lever linkage spring, hold your finger over it as you tension it, so if the tension slips, the spring doesn't go shooting out across the room. With the X600, the advanced lever plate will need to be tipped to get into position. With all other X-series cameras, the advanced lever plate can just be dropped into position. Mirror box seated properly and no pinched wires, you can go ahead and put in the 4 screws that hold the front plate assembly into position. Well, now the E-ring retainer for the advanced lever linkage arm was almost forgotten. If you forget to install the E-ring, it might work for a while, but eventually it'll disconnect and the camera will lock up. Okay, before proceeding any further, let's take note of the difference in the other X-series cameras, how the battery chamber is located in the advanced lever cover plate. Here is a camera other than the X600, and notice the missing battery chamber on the front of the camera. Now we'll need to install the screws in the reverse order that we took them out on either side of the eyepiece. Note the size of the screws aren't all the same, so make sure you put the proper screws back into the proper holes. With the ceramic ASA plate fitted back around the rewind shaft assembly, the wires will need to be soldered back into position. Hopefully you wrote down the position of the wires so that you get them soldered back properly. Soldering connections onto a ceramic circuit requires a little hotter iron than onto a typical connection. And now for probably one of the trickiest parts of the X600 assembly process is to get the battery chamber attached back to the front of the camera with the contacts in the proper position. If you remove the battery chamber and battery contacts as a unit, you'll need to remember to resolder the positive and negative wires to their appropriate connections. Of course, put in the screws into their proper position. Okay, now, well, not okay, but anyway, to move on, we'll need to put the contacts in their proper position around the rewind hub. Sometimes the names of all these parts, they just get away. So to move on, we need to set the linkage with the shutter speed dial to the linkage of the shutter speed base on the circuit. We also need to put the shutter release button and spring into position, and then seat the top cover. With the top cover seated, we need to make certain that the on-off button is actually moving the on-off switch, and you can see that it does connect. Now, with those seated, we'll move to the bottom and double check on the wiring connections, and we can see where there's a disconnect on the battery chamber wire that will need to be soldered. We then loosen the screw that holds the idler of the advance lever gears and pull that apart so the timing can be set on the blue gear with the white gear. You can't really see it here, but there is a timing mark that the two gears line up on, and then the idler is pressed into position and the screw is then tightened down. Remember, before starting this repair, this is a full-fledged teardown of your camera. You're tearing the shutter completely out of the camera. It's as far as complete disassemblies go, this isn't too bad, but it might not be the repair for the timid or the inexperienced. You need to have done a few repairs before you tackle one such as this. But that's no reason to be afraid of it. The camera is broken anyway, so you just as well give it a shot and see if you can get the shutter bands back in the proper position on the rollers and your Derailed X-series camera back in business.
Thank you for watching. Inspired? Check back for new video postings.